You know, in a lot of ways, I think we should have probably seen a lot of what is happening right now coming. Welcome to Unbelievable Reality Podcast. I am Roy Arthur. I'm going to do a brief summary in this podcast of kind of everything that's going on, tying it to the history of the United States that I am trying to, make sense of for people that have graduated from an educational system that never actually taught us anything about the real history of the United States of America. Behind me you can see a collection of books and memorabilia as we're headed into our 250th anniversary of this grand experiment, this democratic republic, this loose confederation of 50 definitely different states. These are things I've collected over the years as I've also spent that time studying American history. You know, let's start with capitalism, just to kind of start this off. Back in 1770, there was a guy named Adam Smith, and he was the first person to actually write a book endorsing and advocating for free trade, basically free trade. And basically giving the explanation that the quality of labor should be equivalent to the quality of wages because they were both a fair exchange, and that's how capitalism actually worked and why that was such a fantastic system, because there was balance in that system in that the quality of wages matched the quality of production and therefore the product. Also, therefore, leading to more wealth. This concept is the foundation of modern capitalism today. Along the way, there's been a lot of things that have happened that have kind of broken his original concept. But the book that is probably the one that's the most quoted is a book he wrote called The Wealth of Nations. And in it he describes what truly makes a nation wealthy. And that, in his view, was how free market capitalism worked. You know, I made something, I owned a company, I paid somebody to make something for me, I sold it to you. You received value in what you bought from me. My laborers received value for producing what you bought from me, and I took a cut of the profits. Everybody had their role in that. And up until really the 1970s, loosely capitalism kind of worked. There were some things that were added to capitalism that kind of fucked up the original concept, one of those being slavery, which is really what the wealth of this country from the original Revolutionary War up until the Civil War and beyond, slavery is where the money came from, period fucking the end. And for some reason, white society just cannot accept that reality. And our shame is so deep as a culture that we continue to persecute these blacks and minorities in a desperate attempt to still live the mythology that it wasn't slavery that actually was the backbone of the capitalistic society we currently live in today. But Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations, kind of held together up until 1970-ish, when a guy named Milton Friedman came along and just wrote an essay called The Friedman Doctrine that got picked up by every fucking CEO in the United States of America and beyond, which basically said it didn't matter how much value you gave your customer. What mattered was how much value you gave to your shareholders, i.e. the people that own your company. If you're a public company, we could trace the history of public companies back to the very first one, the Dutch West Indies Company in England in the late 1600s. The first stock ever sold was sold in England by the Dutch West Indies Company, and it was a percentage of ownership. A consortium of guys came together. They each owned a percentage to start a company that went and exploited India and Africa and later the United States of America. Thank you so very much. The Friedman Doctrine kind of turned capitalism on its head, though. Prior to that, there was still a balance, because there was a second book that Adam Smith wrote that was a parallel to The Wealth of Nations. And that book was called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And what Adam Smith was trying to explain was that free market capitalism works as long as there's a moral component to it. And that moral component means that you give fair value in exchange for profit. In English, what that means is I make good shit and you keep buying it from me because I make good shit. And because I am not a monopoly, i.e., I'm the only one that makes that good shit, if I don't make good stuff, then you have the choice to not buy my stuff. You can buy it from somebody else. So I had a moral obligation to my customer as a business owner to give them the best product that I could make or deliver. And that, in my mind, is the part of capitalism that no longer works. That is what we have lost in this culture, in this society, in this grand experiment. We've lost the moralistic component of capitalism, which also includes workers. Because if you're running a moral company, you want to reward the people that are helping you make the products you sell to keep your customers satisfied and coming back for more. So the more money the company makes, the more money I pay my workers, because they deserve morally and ethically, they deserve a share in the profits of my success. Starting with the Friedman Doctrine in the 70s and then into the Reagan administration we go, where trickle-down economics has become the rule of the land, the law of the land, is trickle down. To this day, they still will not let that go. And that is why we have such a disparity in this country between the richest of the rich and the rest of us. That wealth gap now, and I hate cliches. I hate people in podcasts or broadcasts or posts that use cliches, so forgive me when I do, but wealth gap is pretty much it. That gap between the richest of the rich and the rest of us is bigger than it has ever been in the history of mankind. Period. There's never been anything like this. Ever. That's how bad it is. And I propose this. This is why I'm doing this podcast. This is why I needed to do this podcast. I really don't think people would be that upset about the rich getting richer if they just kept up their end of the bargain, which is to give us better shit. To produce healthy food, to provide a stable healthcare system, to stop surveilling us and stealing our data, to build affordable homes that were quality. One of the biggest things that's happened in the home building industry, and by the way, there are 3 builders in the United States, Pulte Homes, D.L. Horton, and one other one that I cannot remember the name of right now, I should have added in my notes, that own 80% of all new home construction in the United States. 3 companies. Now tell me that's not a fucking monopoly. And what's happening is the quality of their products is getting worse and worse and worse. There's a whole series of podcasts on how horrifically bad the United States construction industry is. We're terrible. We're terrible at it because they're so busy trying to capture every cent they can to please their shareholders and make their CEOs richer that they're skimping on the product they're selling to us. The double whammy of this is they're charging more money for it. That's the part I think that's really starting to piss Americans off. It's not just that you're fucking us. It's that you're delivering an inferior product. You're not only taking more, you're giving less. Every day. And in every way possible. And this goes from planned obsolescence in the electronics industry, in the automobile industry. How cars are literally built today to start falling apart within 36 to 48 months. The software specifically, it's now programmed into the computer of the car for shit to start going wrong. So that you have to buy another car. There's no accountability either. What do? You can't fix your car because that's another thing the automobile industry has done. They've walled off the independent mechanics. So now, if you want to get your new Ford, GM, Chrysler, whatever the fuck it is, repaired, you have to take it to Ford. You have to take it to GM. Bob down at Bob's Auto Shop can't work on your car anymore because they won't give him the software. So you're trapped into repairing your car at whatever price they choose to charge you. And you have nowhere else to go. And to make it even better, there's a deal between GM, Ford, and Chrysler that they can't repair each other's cars. So if you take your Chevy to a Ford dealership, they say, too bad, so sorry, we can't work on it. Their excuse is, we don't have the software. The point of the story is that, first of all, the United States of America was started by a bunch of wealthy white men who were simply tired of paying so much money to England. And they figured if they could piss off enough average everyday folks who really didn't understand how things actually worked, they could get them to rise up and overthrow the English government. And they saw that if they lasted long enough, they would definitely win because it was a war of attrition. We celebrate July 4th, 1776 as our Independence Day. That was the day we formally declared independence. But the Revolutionary War took 8 years to end. And it simply ended because the English ran out of money and men. And they just couldn't fight any longer. They came back in 1812, the Forgotten War, one of the many forgotten wars in American history, and tried again, came down from Canada, got all the way to Washington, D.C., burned it to the ground, and then they ran out of gas. That war took 2 years. And really, that war is what made Andrew Jackson our most racist president ever. Well, kind of hard to tell. They're all so fucking racist. Right up until Obama, to be honest, because what did he have to be racist about? Oh, right. I guess apparently he was racist towards white people. Still haven't figured that one the fuck out. But Andrew Jackson won in New Orleans and closed off the Mississippi River so the British couldn't come from the south. That's kind of a Cliff Note summary of how the War of 1812 ended. We beat them in the south, They couldn't come any farther from the north. They couldn't resupply through our coastlines. Once again, they ran out of men, they ran out of money, and they ran out of time. End of war. But you got to give the British credit because they did try again. Point of the matter is that we've all grown up in the United States of America believing that this was the land of freedom, the home of the brave, and that we had unalienable rights that were vested to us in the Constitution, because that's what we were taught. That's the national mythology. We were never taught about the genocide of the Native American population to make way for all this growth. We never talked about the exploitation of slave labor, which enabled this growth. We never talk about the extraction of minerals, of timber, of land from this country. We don't talk about that in our version of American history. Our version of American history is so whitewashed, it's unbelievable. And the fact that it is so deeply rooted in the American psyche, even today, with all of the data available to us, explains so much about human beings and how they work and how desperately they will hang on to an idea unto death because it is their very identity. This is something I talk about all the time with people that reach out to me through Project Epiphany, is these kind of questions, these kind of issues. But the point of the podcast is we're reaching a seminal point in the history of this country with this anniversary, this 250th anniversary, because our capitalistic society is not working anymore. It just simply doesn't work. We have terrible food, we have horrible roads, we have a collapsing electrical system, an electrical grid system across the entire nation is 60 years old. We still use trees, tree trunks. Think about that, tree trunks, to hold high voltage electrical lines. The number one causes of fires in the Northwest is electrical malfunction from these tree trunks breaking. They're tree trunks. Sidebar, the United States of America spent over $10 trillion fighting foreign wars since Vietnam. $10 trillion. In the last 20 years alone, we've spent $5 trillion fighting wars. Think about that. $5 trillion. The Chinese, on the other hand, haven't fought a single war. Not one. And they took that $5 trillion and they've been investing it in the infrastructure of their country. A state-of-the-art electrical grid. A forest of trees to stop erosion from the west. Buildings, skyscrapers, free health care, the Three Gorges Dam, the biggest dam in the history of the world, completed in 3 years. While we have been spending our money abroad, while our rich have been getting richer, the Chinese, with our help, because we shipped all of our jobs to them as well, we shipped away all of our manufacturing to China because they had cheap labor and they took it. Of course they took those jobs. Why wouldn't they? And now China has the most advanced country in the world. Period. The end. And newsflash for all my fellow countrymen, we aren't going to catch them. Because what we did instead was we made the poor poorer. We made buying a house almost impossible. We never raised wages. We didn't compensate people for their labor. We didn't follow Adam Smith's original concept of free trade and capitalism. We did the opposite. We put out shittier and shittier products so that we could always maintain the bottom line and so that the rich could get richer. And now we have droughts throughout the Southwest, and we're facing a water crisis in a country that has more water than 90% of the other countries in the world. We're facing a water crisis. We have an electrical grid, as I mentioned before, that cannot handle the 4,300 data centers that are already built, under construction, or planned to come online. We are in another war in Iran where we're spending $1 billion a day. We're $38 trillion in debt. One of the biggest debt holders, of course, is China. My summary on all of this is this. The book that everybody missed is the book that every business owner, leader should have read. And that was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Because what's happened to American capitalism is that it's rotten. It's rotten to the core because we have no values. We don't value our workers and we don't value our customers. The only thing that has value left in this country is for the rich to get richer and to extract every last penny from us that they possibly can. And I have no idea, other than a complete overhaul of the American system and government, I have no idea how this ever gets any better. Not a single one. I'm Roy Arthur. This is Unbelievable Reality Podcast. As always, if you don't like what I have to say, well then don't fucking watch. I know this podcast was a bit rambling. I tried to cover a lot. Tune in next week for Iran, electric, water, data centers, AI explosion, and why does that matter to you right now? Check it out. You're gonna want to see it. I got a lot of new information from a bunch of new sources. Talk to you soon.